Liberal Viewer presents.
So, welcome to the January 14th edition of Liberal Viewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I've picked out the weekend's 10 best, most newsworthy clips for what should be a really informative, educational, fair use media criticism and political analysis show for you all tonight. The political comedy source tonight is actually last night's Saturday Night Live, the first Saturday Night Live for 2018. No Alec Baldwin as Donald Trump, but there was a special surprise guest you probably already saw in the thumbnail, and that's the first clip I'll be showing you, the Bill Murray as Steve Bannon, along with Fred Armisen as, I don't know why I blanked on Fred Armisen's name, Fred Armisen as Michael Wolff, the author of the book that you can see I now actually own, Fire and Fury. I have not had a chance to read it yet. Just got it yesterday, finally found a copy. I will be reading it. I'll let you know more about that. But the big topic this week isn't the Fire and Fury book. It's sort of the next big scandal. It's what Donald Trump said about immigrants from Africa and possibly from Haiti and possibly some other countries, basically calling them shithole countries, or it was pretty terrible. And that was not even part of the cold open because there was no Donald Trump in the cold open on Saturday Night Live. But I'll actually show you a Saturday Night Live clip in the second clip, Weekend Update, where they cover that issue. But the first clip I want to show you does actually, they used the Fred Armisen impression of Michael Wolff to give a rumor about Donald Trump, a obviously false rumor, or hopefully false rumor, but it has a racist tinge to it, so they even put a little bit of racism in the cold open. And it started with a parody of Morning Joe on MSNBC. I actually watched that show a lot, not every morning, but I watched it enough to notice that when they get 2 hours into the program, they repeat the first half hour, and then they do a new half hour for the final half hour of the 3 hours. So that shows I've probably spent too much time watching that show. But here's the parody of Morning Joe with Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski, and then of course the Fred Armisen Michael Wolff character, and then the surprise Steve Bannon cameo in this clip.
You say the president watches TV most of the day. He eats McDonald's because he's afraid of being poisoned. Is there anything that you didn't include?
Well, sure. Probably the worst one is the baby races.
What?
Beg your pardon?
They were baby races. Trump would ask to have 2 babies placed in his office, usually of different ethnicities. Someone would put a bowl of goldfish crackers on the other side of the room, and Trump would say $1,000 on the black one.
Is that real?
Yeah.
Now, Michael, there's been several errors pointed out in this book already. Do you take responsibility for those?
Look, you read it, right?
Yeah, of course.
And you liked it? You had fun?
Yeah.
Well, what's the problem? You got the gist, so shut up.
Michael, one person who is heavily featured in this book is Steve Bannon, who was just let go as head of Breitbart News. Here to talk about it, Steve Bannon.
Thanks for having me.
Steve, good Lord.
My God, Steve, I always thought you looked like death, but this is death formed over.
Danke, Mika. Nice words. Blessings.
Okay, so you guys know each other, right?
No, of course I got him fired.
Come on, I got you hired.
Oh, you love it. Even the negative stuff, you love it.
Don't love it. Don't love it. Look, no one gets the Bannon fired. No one.
Except me. I did.
I never said Don Jr. was treasonous.
Yes, you did.
Well, I certainly never said that he'd crack like an egg on TV.
Yeah, that sounds exactly like you.
Okay, that does sound like me. Yeah. All right, thank you. Good reporting. But look, The cannon magic is still out there. Steve Bannon, the Bannon cannon, magic, 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 magic. King of kingmakers, Osmandius. The Bannon dynasty is dawning.
So that wasn't a really good Steve Bannon impression by Bill Murray. He doesn't really look like Steve Bannon. They put like the wig on him. Yeah, I don't know. Did they not put makeup on him to give him bad? I don't know. Does he have like bad skin at this point from all that time out golfing since the Caddyshack days? I don't know. But I mean, Fred Armisen on the other hand looks a lot like Michael Wolff. I think I even saw one of my patrons and viewers, Chris Lepaco, had predicted years ago, the last time Michael Wolff had a book, that that Fred Armisen should play Michael Wolff on Saturday Night Live, and now it's finally come to pass. So congratulations to Chris Lepaco on that prediction. But I actually thought the person, not that Fred Armisen was bad at least in terms of looking like Michael Wolff, but the best person I've seen to play Steve Bannon is actually James Corden over on the CBS Late Late Show. I took a screen grab of that. So I don't know. You can see James Corden looks a lot like Steve Bannon, although he looks so much like Steve Bannon that they got Reggie Watts, his band leader, there to play Donald Trump, who obviously looks nothing like Donald Trump. But I also was thinking maybe Melissa McCarthy. Maybe Melissa McCarthy, since there's no Sean Spicer anymore, she could probably play Steve Bannon. But anyway, like I said, that there was a little bit of a racial component to the first joke in there. Bill Murray did a couple better jokes. I didn't think his jokes were that funny. I thought the jokes were a little bit better in the way they played with the censors on NBC in the Weekend Update. You'll see at the beginning, Colin Jost says that they won't let him say the word that the President of the United States supposedly said about immigrants from Africa and possibly Haiti. And that's this 2-minute clip from Saturday Night Live last night, Weekend Update, Colin Jost, and then Michael Che talking about that. And you'll see they actually start with a reference to the Michael Wolff Fire and Fury book again, because Saturday Night Live has been gone so long. And they don't really talk about the inaccuracies. That's the one thing I forgot to talk about in the last clip, that they did poke fun at the inaccuracies that I'll be looking forward to figuring out as I actually read the book. But that's just the intro to the Is Trump Racist topic that will be the big topic tonight. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to say, if you want to follow along with the clips, down in the video description, I put a link to my clip list. Oh, if it's a recorded show, I forgot to do that before the live show. But anyway, here's the Saturday Night Live clip from last night, Weekend Update, before we get to the real news clips over here.
The book Fire and Fury, a salacious expose of the Trump White House, was released last week. And then this week, the sequel wrote itself. During an Oval Office meeting, Trump attacked protections for immigrants from African countries, which he called S-holes. That's what NBC asked us to say, by the way, S-hole, even though the president can say shithole. At this point, I feel bad at this point for parents with young children. Every word you tell your kid not to say, they can be like, but the president gets to say it. The most insane thing is that Trump said all of this racist stuff right before Martin Luther King Day, which is like pounding a case of beer on your way to rehab. Now I'm just worried about what he's going to say the day before Passover. Trump also said that instead we should take more immigrants from countries like Norway. And Norwegians were like, America? We're not going to that, Shatterhoven.
Can I be honest? When someone asked me, did you hear what Donald Trump called Haiti and Africa? I was like, oh boy, did it start with an N? But then I heard what he said, and I was like, that's it? I've said that about countries for not having a CVS. Here's the thing. My job is to make jokes about the news, but Trump saying something racist isn't exactly news anymore. It'd be news if Trump said, you know what we need more in this country? Haitians. And by the way, he's not the only one here that thinks like that. I've lived in this country my entire life, and I've been asked to go back to Africa several times, and it's never been because they thought I'd enjoy it there. But Donald, you do realize how rich these places are in resources, right? I mean, they're in bad shape because they've been robbed and exploited for centuries by Western powers. So the president of the United States calling Africa a shithole is like telling a kid you molested, boy, did you grow up to be weird.
I like that last joke there that Michael Che told, and overall, like I said, I thought the Weekend Update jokes were a lot better than the writing in the cold open. I don't know if it's because Michael Che and Colin Jost are now co-head writers of Saturday Night Live this season, but I like that's generally, as you can tell from the clips I choose, it's usually from the cold open because of the surprise guests and the better writing on Weekend Update. I like those jokes, like I said, and the question as to whether Donald Trump is racist, I've actually put a poll, I think up in this corner you can click on this little eye and you can answer the question, is President Donald Trump a racist? And I've actually given you several different options, including one based on, I saw a clip right before I started the show. Donald Trump came out at Mar-a-Lago and he answered the question. He said he is the least racist person that they've ever interviewed, and that's something he says over and over again. Least racist person you've ever met. So if that's what you believe, you can actually say Donald Trump is the least racist person, or you can say that there's a real pattern of racism. I kind of waver between a couple different answers, which I'll talk about after I show you some of the clips, or maybe even after I show you all the clips. But the first two clips, the actual news clips I want to show you, are the news summaries from NBC's Meet the Press and ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. As usual, they both had these very thorough news summaries of Donald Trump's week and the trouble he got into with the shithole countries comment, or however you want to believe what happened, and some of the controversy as to whether he said it. And then both NBC's Meet the Press and ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos spent a significant amount of time giving the pattern, the context that shows that this is not some isolated comment, where the comment is racist. And that's one of the sides that sometimes I lean towards. You can't tell what's in someone's heart, so you can say if a comment is racist, but you can't say someone is racist. But if there's a long pattern of them making racist comments, then I think that might start to sway you, and both NBC and ABC show that. I'll start with NBC's Meet the Press. Both of these are about 3 minutes, 40 seconds. Here's the first one. Like I said, Chuck Todd, NBC's Meet the Press this morning here.
A week that began with President Trump feeling he needed to prove he was mentally fit to handle his job, ended with him facing charges that he is a racist. Just asking that question, is the President of the United States of America a racist? It's deeply uncomfortable. But it's an issue that's now being openly discussed. A measure of just how widespread the reaction has been to his S-hole comments about African countries can be seen in newspaper and editorial headlines from around the country this weekend. And let's be clear, the issue is not whether President Trump used salty language. Most presidents do. The issue is the sentiment behind that language, including that Norway comment. But this week's vulgar comments have left the president forced to hear, if not address, a very uncomfortable question.
Mr. President, are you a racist?
President Trump ignoring questions at an MLK Day event on Friday after railing against African immigrants from S-hole countries at a closed-door immigration meeting, suggesting that the U.S. should accept more people from places like Norway.
That's when he used these vile and vulgar comments, calling the nations they come from.
The president took to Twitter with a vague, partial denial, saying his comments at the meeting were, quote, tough, but this was not the language used. But a source close to the president told NBC News, quote, he frequently uses that kind of language. The New York Times reported last month that in June, the president told advisors that immigrants from Haiti all have AIDS, and said that once they had seen the United States, Nigerian immigrants would never go back to their huts. Those comments in private should not be a surprise, given what the president has said in public.
Why aren't we letting people in from Europe? I have many friends, many friends, and nobody wants to talk this. Nobody wants to say it.
Mr. Trump has a history of racially charged episodes that dates back more than 4 decades. In 1973, the Justice Department sued Mr. Trump and his father for discriminating against African-American applicants for rental units. Mr. Trump re-entered national politics by leading the so-called birther movement.
He gave a birth certificate. Whether or not that was a real certificate, because a lot of people question it, I certainly question it.
He launched his presidential campaign on the idea that immigrants from Mexico were rapists.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
And insisted that those who resisted white supremacists and neo-Nazis in Charlottesville were equally to blame.
You also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
On Friday, the reaction from Republicans was muted, with most Republican leaders declining to comment. 2 Republican senators in the meeting put out a statement saying they do not recall the president saying these comments specifically. Another, Senator Lindsey Graham, indirectly confirmed them, making it clear in a statement that, following comments by the president, I said my piece directly to him. And some Republicans did condemn the comments outright.
Totally inappropriate. You should apologize.
First thing that came to my mind was very unfortunate, unhelpful.
That is not the kind of statement the leader of the free world ought to make, and he ought to be ashamed of himself.
But Senate candidates in Arizona and Ohio, who are nervous about Mr. Trump's base in the primary, defended the president.
I speak a little salty behind closed doors at times as well, and so I'm not going to throw the first tone on using any language.
I've said all along, the president many times says what people are thinking.
Joining me now from Bowling Green.
And joining Chuck Todd there, from Bowling Green that was, I think, the Rand Paul interview, and I didn't take any of the Rand Paul interview. Of course, as usual, you can see the full programs of all the sources I use at links I put down in the video description. But like I said, I thought that was a very good news summary, and also contextualization from NBC's Meet the Press as to Donald Trump's history of racist statements. But I think ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos has to win again this week. I think, is this like the 3rd week in a row? I'm not sure. I haven't been keeping count, but ABC seems to be edging out NBC most weeks. And I will give you 3 words as to why I think ABC beat NBC, and those 3 words are Central Park 5. You did not hear mention of the Central Park 5 in that NBC Meet the Press article, story, but you will see it in the ABC story, although they don't mention how even after they were exonerated, he still said the Central Park 5 were guilty, which I will discuss with you after we watch this ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary and contextualization about whether our president is a racist over here.
Good morning. This week was supposed to be a fresh start for President Trump. To combat the fallout from that explosive book, Fire and Fury, he called cameras into the White House to watch him negotiate an immigration deal with a bipartisan group of legislators. It was an extraordinary moment, and it seemed to work. Until Thursday. Another immigration meeting, this one behind closed doors in the Oval Office, where the president repeated that profanity when discussing immigration from Africa and Haiti. Stunning remarks that put a lingering question in stark relief. Is President Trump a racist?
Today we celebrate Dr. King for standing up for the self-evident truth Americans hold so dear, that no matter what the color of our skin or the place of our birth, we are all created equal by God.
President Trump at the White House on Friday praising Martin Luther King like so many presidents before. Then came the questions.
Mr. President, will you give an apology for the statement yesterday? Mr. President, are you a racist? Mr. President, will you respond to these serious questions about your statement, sir?
Questions about the vulgar and racist slur Trump used when discussing immigration from Africa and Haiti. It happened during an Oval Office meeting with legislators on Thursday. The president was frustrated by a bipartisan plan that would scale back the visa lottery program but not eliminate it. Multiple sources confirmed to ABC News that the president asked those in the room why they would want people from Haiti, Africa, and other expletive countries coming into the United States. Instead, he suggested the U.S. should bring in more people from European countries like Norway. The White House did not deny the president's statement. The next day, Trump tweeted an ambiguous denial. But Republican Senator Lindsey Graham said he countered the president's comments in the moment. And Democrat Richard Durbin said Trump could not have been more clear.
He used these vile and vulgar comments, calling the nations they come from the exact word used by the president, not just once, but repeatedly. That was the nature of this conversation.
Global reaction has been swift and severe.
I'm sorry, but there's no other word one can use but racist.
Condemnation from Haiti, El Salvador, and an emergency meeting of the UN African ambassadors, which called on President Trump to apologize for his racist and xenophobic remarks. Questions about Trump and race have dogged him for decades. In 1973, the Justice Department sued Trump, his father, and their corporation for, quote, discriminating against black persons in the operation of their buildings, a case Trump settled without admission. In 1989, Trump campaigned against the Central Park Five, 5 African-American and Latino men accused and later exonerated for charges of rape. He placed full-page ads in 4 New York newspapers. I want to hate these muggers and murderers, he wrote. They should be forced to suffer, and when they kill, they should be executed for their crimes. As he prepared to run for president, Trump promoted the birther movement against President Obama.
Of course there's a question. There are many questions about where he was born. Was it a birth certificate? You tell me. You know, some people say that was not his birth certificate. So maybe it was, maybe it wasn't.
As a candidate, his announcement speech a blast against Mexican immigrants.
They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime. They're rapists. And some, I assume, are good people.
And a Mexican-American judge.
There's a hostility toward me by the judge, tremendous hostility, beyond belief. I believe he happens to be Spanish, which is fine.
And as president, those inflammatory comments after a white supremacist rally in Charlottesville.
But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
And with that, let's bring in Congressman John Lewis of Georgia.
And I'm actually going to have the John Lewis, some meaty parts of the John Lewis interview where I think he has the most forthright answer to the question, is Donald Trump a racist? Much more forthright than any of the other clips I'm going to show. Though I think Republican Mia Love, who's in the next clip, the Republican from Utah and the first Haitian American elected to the Congress, she is a Republican, but she is pretty forthright and kind of upset, although not quite as forthright as John Lewis is about whether the president's a racist, but about his comments and condemning them. In this clip I'm going to show next from CNN's State of the Union, Jake Tapper first does a little bit of an introduction. For the State of the Union, they actually covered the false alarm missile strike in Hawaii, which was covered on all the programs. It was definitely a newsworthy event. I'm not really going to cover it just because it was kind of a fluke thing. I don't think it has, like, well, I don't know. Well, hopefully it won't be a harbinger of things to come, but I did want to show the short, I showed longer news summaries from ABC and from NBC. There's a short summary of the controversy over Donald Trump's statements about the shithole countries in this next clip, and then a long interaction with Mia Love that's definitely worth watching. I've kind of edited the parts together that are about Donald Trump's comments and not specifically about what to do about DACA, which is not something I'm really covering as much, but I might talk a little bit about DACA, that's deferred action on childhood arrivals. That's one of the immigration issues, the dreamers, the kids who were brought to the United States, or young people who were brought to the United States as children through no fault of their own, even though they're undocumented. They grew up here. A lot of them know no other country. They're to be qualified for DACA, they have to be in college or have a job or be in the military and have no criminal record. So they're fine, upstanding citizens, except for the fact that they're not citizens. But anyway, that part is kind of cut out of this Mia Love clip. It's more about Donald Trump's comments and her reaction to them as a Haitian American over in this clip.
Welcome back to State of the Union. I'm Jake Tapper. In a new tweet Sunday morning, President Trump reinforced the kind of immigrants he wants to bring into the United States, saying, quote, I, as president, want people coming into our country who are going to help us become strong and great again, people coming in through a system based on merit. No more lotteries, America first, unquote. Parents watching at home, you might want to hit the mute button for the next 20 seconds because I'm about to quote the president's remarks. This new tweet comes after a week in which the president reportedly made degrading remarks in the Oval Office, a source telling me that the president said, quote, Haitians, why do we need more Haitians? And calling African nations, all 54 of them, shithole countries, before suggesting the U.S. may benefit from more immigrants from places such as Norway. One might observe, of course, that coming from Norway is not a particular skill Here now to respond directly to the president is Republican Congresswoman Mia Love of Utah. She's the first Haitian American elected to Congress. Congresswoman, thanks so much for being here. I want to start, of course, with the president's comments about Haiti and African nations. Your parents are immigrants from Haiti. You're the first Haitian American elected to the United States Congress. How did it feel to hear those comments from the president?
Well, Jake, I can't defend the indefensible. You have to understand that there are countries that do struggle out there, but they're people. Their people are good people, and they're part of us. We're Americans. You have to understand that my parents, they came from Haiti. They worked hard. They paid their taxes. When they pledged their allegiance to the American flag and became U.S. citizens, they meant every word of it, and they did everything they could to take on not just the benefits, but the responsibilities of what it meant to be an American citizen. And you have to understand, I'm a product of that. I am the American dream. That's who we are. Those are not just American values, but they're certainly Utah values, and they're values that we all hold dear. So it was really difficult to hear, especially because my parents were such big supporters of the president. And I think that we have to do everything we can to make sure that we are coming from a place of compassion and we're speaking from a place of kindness. I mean, that is the at least minimal standard here.
You're calling for President Trump to apologize. He obviously hasn't done so on Twitter. Have you heard from him at all?
Well, the White House did reach out. They would like to meet with us. I don't know what is going to be said, what is going to be done. I hope that we are actually going to work on fixing DACA. You have to understand, we cannot let this derail us. I think the worst thing that can happen right now is for DACA, for there not to be a fix at all.
Let me ask you about the Dreamers and DACA after this last question on the president's comments. What do you say to the Haitian American who comes to you and says, Congresswoman, I think the president's racist?
Well, here's what I say. My parents have always taught me not to be a victim. My parents have taught me that no matter what somebody else feels, that's their problem, not mine. That I'm not the one that's flawed when somebody feels some way about me because of the way I look or my gender or whatever that is. So I think that at this point, we can't look to Washington. We can't look to the president to tell us how to behave, how to feel. We have to be respectful. We are responsible for who we are and how we behave. And when history looks back at us, they'll judge us for whether we're able to rise to the occasion and rise above the negativity, or whether we wallowed in it and allowed it to take us down. That's what I would say. The
president's comments, of course, come as lawmakers are trying to get a deal done on DACA and the Dreamers, as you've noted. Were the comments racist, do you think?
I think they were, yes. I think that they were unfortunate. I don't know if they were taken. I wasn't in the room. I know the comments were made. I don't know which context they were made. I'm looking forward to finding out what happened, but more importantly, I'm looking forward to trying to fix the problem. I think we have to hold ourselves to a higher standard.
All right, well, best of luck solving the problem. We really appreciate your being here this morning, Congresswoman. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, like I said, that's an edited part of the Mia Love interview. You can see the whole thing at a link to the CNN State of the Union site down in the video description. I cut out the part where she talked about why getting a fix for DACA, which I explained what DACA is earlier in the Dreamers. She talked about that more extensively, but she did at least say the comments were racist, and that's one. I put that poll up here in the, no, is it that way? Yeah, there's a little eye here in the corner you can click on and take the poll. One of your options is that the comments are racist, because you can never know someone's intent for sure unless they tell you they're racist, I guess. But then there's the pattern that I showed, and I don't know. She didn't say Donald Trump himself was racist. She did at the beginning say she can't defend the indefensible, but I guess she's waiting to hear more. She's waiting to talk to Donald Trump. She is a Republican. She's a Haitian Republican from Utah, which is, I don't know, seems like a very, I don't think that's a very large demographic, but I could be wrong about that. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. Now, I promised you this John Lewis clip, and where John Lewis would be the would answer most forthrightly whether Donald Trump is a racist. And this actually starts with George Stephanopoulos giving you John Lewis's credentials. And also, since Martin Luther King Day is coming up tomorrow, I've edited a clip at the end where John Lewis, who of course marched with Martin Luther King Jr., says what he thinks Martin Luther King would say to us today if he were alive today. And John Lewis, as you'll see in the beginning of this clip, certainly has the credentials to give us that opinion as to what Martin Luther King Jr. would say, which I will discuss with you after we watch this whole clip together. One of my favorite clips from for the program. I'm a big fan of John Lewis. What can I say over here?
Of Georgia, a leader in the civil rights movement who marched side by side with Martin Luther King in Selma and Washington more than 50 years ago. Congressman Lewis, thank you for joining us this morning. Let me just start out by asking you, how do you square the president's speech about Martin Luther King on Friday with those comments he made behind closed doors on Thursday?
George, I don't think there's any way that you can square what the president said with the words of Martin Luther King Jr. and with what he said about Dr. King. It's just impossible. There's not any way you can do that. It's unreal. It's unbelievable. It makes me sad. It makes me cry. As a nation and as a people, we've come so far. We made so much progress. And here in Georgia, when I visit schools, whether it's elementary school students and middle school students, they're black, they're white, they're Latino, they're Asian American, they're Native American. And they look like the dream and act like the dream of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We've come so far, we made so much progress. And I think this man, this president, is taking us back to another place.
Do you think President Trump is a racist?
I think he is a racist.
How do you explain it, and what do we do about it?
We have to stand up, we have to speak up, and not try to sweep it under the rug.
And what does that mean? I've heard that many of you in the Congress this week, Democrats in Congress, are going to try to bring forward a motion to censure the president.
Well, I tell you, as a member of the House, when that resolution come up, I will be one of the people to speak up and speak out. I think we should do it. We must do it. We must educate our children and generation yet unborn.
But you will not be in attendance when the president comes to give the State of the Union at the end of this month?
In good conscience, I cannot and will not sit there and listen at him as he gives the State of the Union address.
This week, finally, Congressman, this is Martin Luther King Jr. weekend. Of course, we honor his memory tomorrow. What do you believe that Martin Luther King would be preaching this Sunday if he were still alive?
If Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was still alive, he would be speaking the idea that we are one people, we're one family, we all live in the same house, not just the American house or the world house, that we must learn to live together as brothers and sisters. If not, we will perish as fools.
Congressman Lewis, thanks for your time this morning.
Well, like I said, I really enjoyed John Lewis's very forthright answer to the question, is Donald Trump a racist? I think he is a racist. So there you get your straightforward answer. And I don't know, instead of is Donald Trump a racist as the poll question that I put up here, maybe I should have put up the question, are we all going to perish as fools? That would have covered the whole Hawaii false alarm story as well, I guess. Because, I don't know, sometimes watching the news, I think maybe we are going to all perish as fools. But you saw that clip there in which John Lewis, I think, made a very passionate argument as to why what Donald Trump said is worth making a civil rights hero like John Lewis cry. Why it is the opposite of the American values that he fought for all these years. There is a very small amount of agreement between Democratic Congressman John Lewis from Georgia and the Republican Senator from Georgia, David Perdue, who was actually one of the people in the room when Donald Trump supposedly made the shithole comment. The next 3 clips I'm going to play are actually all from Republicans who were in the room. There's going to be David Perdue, then Tom Cotton, and then Donald Trump's Secretary of Homeland Security, Kirstjen Nielsen. So those will be the next 3 clips, and they all, in various kind of slippery ways, try to deny he used that exact language, or that Donald Trump, they don't recall, or it's, I don't know, they're in various different ways, they're kind of slippery. It's a gross mischaracterization, and they both, you'll see that both David Perdue in this next clip, and then Republican Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas in the subsequent clip, both have talking points attacking Dick Durbin, the Democratic senator from Illinois, who was also in the room, who said that Donald Trump repeatedly used the word shithole. You'll see David Perdue says it's a gross mischaracterization, but he'll never say what he said. There was this weird interpretation I heard from Rich Lowry, the editor of National Review, as a pundit on one of the shows. He said Donald Trump's whole reaction and the Republican reaction is based on the fact that what they're not going to say is Donald Trump didn't say shithole. He said that they were shit house countries. And that's like some huge distinction. So they can say that's not the language. You know, I didn't use that language. That's what Donald Trump said in his tweet. And that, you know, it's a gross mischaracterization. It's, you know, and of course, Lindsey Graham said it was basically accurate, which will come up in this David Perdue clip. And I think I've done enough analysis before the clip. Guess I'll do a little analysis after we watch that clip together of the Republican senator from Georgia also reacting to that great clip we just watched from the Democratic congressman from Georgia, John Lewis. Here's the Republican senator, who is much less enjoyable over here.
I know that you're one of President Trump's closest allies in the Senate. How do you respond to what we just heard from Congressman Lewis, that he believes President Trump is a racist?
Well, of course, I think that's ridiculous. I grew up in the South. I fully understand what that means. But the congressman and I just disagree on a couple things. First, I'm from Georgia. I've been in those schools he's talking about, and he's exactly right that regardless of race, religion, anything, those schools, those kids are doing great together. The problem is when you get to the Washington politicians, the career politicians who want to pander to their base. What we have going on here right now is a gross misrepresentation. This all started with a total misrepresentation of a meeting that happened last Thursday. And people forget that just 2 days earlier, this president, in an open meeting with media in there for almost an hour, George, debated this with both sides, Democrats, Republicans, House members, and the Senate. And what we forget is that 72% of Americans want us to solve this problem. We want to solve the DACA problem. We want to have border security with a wall. We want to end chain migration and end this archaic diversity lottery. That's the scope that we all agreed to on Tuesday. Then on Thursday, we had a meeting, and coming out of that meeting, we had a gross misrepresentation of what happened in that meeting. But it's not the first time we've had a gross misrepresentation by that individual.
Let's get into
George.
that.
No, let me finish, George.
Well, I want to know what the gross misrepresentation was.
The gross misrepresentation was that language was used in there that was not used, and also that the tone of that meeting was not contributory and not constructive. In 2013, Senator Durbin also made the same accusation against a Republican leader in a meeting with President Obama and said that it was he chewed out the president. It was so disrespectful to President Obama, we couldn't even have the meeting. That's what he said in 2013. Later that day, the president's own press secretary came out and said, and I quote, "It did not happen." This is about a gross misrepresentation. It's not the first time. These people have been trying for 35 years to solve this immigration problem without success for one reason, and that is I don't believe they're serious about trying to solve that right now.
You just said that what Senator Durbin said, the words the president used were not used. You said that did not happen. But it's not just Senator Durbin who said that. I mean, Senator Lindsey Graham has put out a statement saying that he countered the president's words in the moment, and he told his Republican colleague from South Carolina, Tim Scott, that the reports of that meeting were basically accurate. Those comments have been confirmed by multiple sources. You're saying it didn't happen?
Multiple sources. There were 6 of us in the room. I haven't heard any of those 6 sources other than Senator Durbin talk about what was said. Look,
well,
this
Senator
was a private
Graham told
meeting with the
Senator
president.
Scott
This was
that
a
the
private
reports were
meeting.
basically accurate.
Well, you don't have to deal with him. Basically is an operative word. The trouble here is that Senator Durbin came and brought a proposal. And let's put this in perspective.
But I want to get to the proposal. But you're saying flat out, definitively, the president did not say those words.
I'm saying that this is a gross misrepresentation. It's not the first time Senator Durbin has done it, and it is not productive to solving the problem.
So what did the president say?
Most people in America, George, want us to solve the DACA situation. Republicans and Democrats want to solve the DACA situation. But we also want to make sure that we're not back here.
I want to get more on that. But just to be clear, I'm not clear on exactly what you're saying happened in this meeting. You say it was a gross misrepresentation. Senator Durbin has been very clear. Senator Graham has told others that the reports were basically accurate. Are you saying the president did not use the word that has been so widely reported?
I'm telling you he did not use that word, George, and I'm telling you it's a gross misrepresentation. How many times do you want me to say that? What is happening here is the same thing that happened in 2013 where you had a press secretary of your president who said it didn't happen. What did happen in that meeting was a very constructive conversation about how to move forward.
So, I don't know, that David Perdue, one of the people in the room, why did it take him that long to come out that strongly? Because first they were saying, I didn't hear it. You know, that's not what I heard. That's what Perdue and Tom Cotton said. Now, finally, after all that questioning, I did a little edit there. Basically, the part that I cut out was David Perdue talking about the DACA issue specifically and not about what Donald Trump said. I think George Stephanopoulos did the best job he could about the exact language, although I think it's actually also important to drill down on the policy, because the policy is what Donald Trump was saying was, you know, I was reading the live comments along the way, and I saw this live comment a little while back. Here, let me see if I can import this from, from NO8549. So, you know, being Norwegian is not a skill, true. So whether he said shithole or shithouse or whether he used any profanity at all, the sentiment was, we don't want people from African countries. We want people from Norway, and more people from countries like Norway is what he supposedly said. Whether he said the profanity or not doesn't really matter, because what he's saying is basically, we like white people. He wants white people, not people, you know, not the brown and black people from Africa and Haiti, and I think there might have been El Salvador and some other countries thrown in there, but and that is not the whole merit system that is supposedly the Republican position, and getting rid of so-called chain migration, which I'll also talk about. But I don't think George Stephanopoulos in that last clip did a great job of pointing out whatever the profanity, whatever the exact words were, that what Donald Trump is purported to have said is a really bad policy, preferring Norwegians to Africans if you're supposedly you want to get merit. And over on CBS's Face the Nation, John Dickerson, I think, when he was cross-examining Tom Cotton, he did a much better job of bringing up that point, which is also true of Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday talking to the Secretary of Homeland Security in the clip I'll show after this one. But first, let me show Tom Cotton, where he finally comes out and pretty much says that Donald Trump didn't use the word shithole to shithole countries, but the weird thing about his denial is he says that he didn't hear it. You know, he was as far away as Dick Durbin, and he didn't hear it. But then he says, but I'm sure he didn't say it repeatedly. You know, I don't know and didn't hear whether he said it once, but I'm sure he didn't say it repeatedly, which seems kind of like a contradiction to me. But you can tell me what you think, as well as the other issue that I mentioned that John Dickerson follows up on about whether, as NO 8549 mentioned, being Norwegian is irrelevant to a merit-based system, which Tom Cotton can't really reconcile over in this clip.
Let's move on to immigration. You were in the Oval Office meeting that's gotten a lot of attention this week, where the president reportedly used a vulgar and derogatory term. Also there was Senator Perdue. He talked to ABC this week, and I want to get your thoughts about what he said and what he told to George Stephanopoulos. Let's watch.
Senator Durbin has been very clear. Senator Graham has told others that the reports were basically accurate. Are you saying the president did not use the word that has been so widely reported?
I'm telling you he did not use that word, George, and I'm telling you it's a gross misrepresentation. How many times do you want me to say that?
Senator, your view on this, the use of this word.
Yeah, John, I didn't hear that word either. I certainly didn't hear what Senator Durbin has said repeatedly. Senator Durbin has a history of misrepresenting what happens in White House meetings, though, so perhaps we shouldn't be surprised by that. Here's what I did hear, and here's the point.
Just sorry to interrupt. You didn't hear the word, or it was not said, because Senator Graham also told Senator Scott, your Republican colleague, that this is what happened. Senator Flake was in a subsequent meeting right afterwards where he was told by people in the meeting this happened. So just to button that up, you're saying it did not happen, or you just don't recall?
I didn't hear it, and I was sitting no further away from Donald Trump than Dick Durbin was, and I know what Dick Durbin has said about the president's repeated statements is incorrect.
So is Durbin lying?
Senator Durbin has misrepresented what happened in White House meetings before, and he was corrected by Obama administration officials. But here's the point, John. We have an immigration system today that treats people based on where they're from or who they're related to, not who they are. That's not the system we need. When Senator Durbin and Senator Graham came to the Oval Office and proposed not to fix that system, but to expand it, to create more quotas, more set-asides for other countries, yeah, the president reacted with pretty tough language, as he said, because we want to move to a system that treats people for who they are, not where they're from.
But isn't that precisely the problem here, is that the president, in the sentiment, leaving aside the word, the sentiment behind it, which Senator Graham thought was strong enough that he rebutted it, and according to accounts in the meeting, the sentiment is to treat people based on where they come from, not who they are, the countries they come from, these African countries or Haiti. So that's treating people in a big old basket, not as who they actually are. And that was the sentiment, forgetting the word for a moment, that's the sentiment the president was expressing.
John, it's the exact opposite. That's what Senator Durbin and Senator Graham are doing. What I'm trying to do and what Senator Perdue wants to do, what the president said he supports, is treat people for who they are. That's why we want to move to a skill-based system. So if you're a doctor or a scientist or a computer programmer, it shouldn't matter whether you come from Nigeria or Norway or any other country on this earth. Today, though, we have a system that rewards ties of blood, ties of kin, ties of clan. That's one of the most un-American immigration systems I can imagine. That's why we're trying to fix it.
The president and White House officials have said, leaving the word aside, they said he used strong language. Help me understand the strong sentiment about why people who come from African countries and Haiti should not be allowed in, and the strong sentiment for why people from Norway should be allowed in. What's the policy sentiment the president is supporting there, if not to put people in baskets?
John, the point is that country of origin quotas are arbitrary, and they treat people based on where they're from, not who they are. Today, for instance, over 300,000 Indians are waiting to immigrate to this country. They can't do so because we have arbitrary caps on the countries from which people come. If you change our immigration system to a skills-based system that respects and treats people for who they are, as individuals as opposed to residents of a certain country or relatives of certain people in the United States, it's a system that is more in keeping with American values.
So then, in this notion of American values, which is what is at the heart of this debate, because what people need to know is that their president isn't judging people based on the color of their skin, but based on those skills that you talked about. So can you say then that the president, in your conversations in this specific one, was not grouping people based on the countries they came from, that was sentiment was nowhere in anything he said, not the words, but the sentiment from him, that was absent from his mind or anything he said?
John, what Senator Durbin and Senator Graham propose is to expand our country of origin and quota-based system The president reacted strongly against that, as he should, and I do as well, because we want to get away from a country of origin system that treats people as Nigerians or Norwegians and treats them as individuals, as doctors and scientists and computer programmers and so forth.
I understand your sentiment. You're quite clear on that. But the president's sentiment, you're saying in all of these meetings there was never an instance in which he did what you're saying, where he grouped people
John,
in that fashion.
in his tweets, in his interviews, in his public statements, just Tuesday, when we had the large meeting in the cabinet room, he repeatedly insists that we need to move to a skills-based system.
You were in the room where it happens. So you're saying in that room you didn't hear any of this sort of lumping everybody together. Is that what you're saying?
I did not hear derogatory comments about individuals or persons, no.
Okay, so this sentiment is totally phony as well, that is attributed to him?
Yes.
Okay. Senator Colin, thank you for helping us nail.
So there you saw, as I introduced pretty extensively before I showed the clip, that John Dickerson this week did a pretty good job of not only getting Tom Cotton to be more definitive as to backing up Donald Trump in his denial of saying the infamous comments about people who come from African countries, what those countries, you know, the shithole comments or whatever. But like I said before I showed the clip, he did kind of say, you know, I don't recall or didn't hear him say it one time, and I'm sure he didn't say it multiple times, which I'm not sure exactly why that's true, or that it seems almost contradictory. And then, of course, John Dickerson followed up really well on this concept about whether he used the profanity or not, but whether he used the profanity or not, it's still his whole sentiment is not really the merit-based system that Republicans claim, but it's more like we want people from Norway, not people from Africa and Haiti, and that's not a merit-based, skill-based system. And I think Chris Wallace over on Fox News Sunday, they also led with the Hawaii false alarm story, and they didn't do a big news summary, and they certainly didn't provide context as to why Donald Trump has a pattern that makes it pretty easy to say he's a racist based on not this one isolated incident, but incidents going back years, decades, to the 70s. I go back a little past the 70s, but not much past the 70s, so if there's a pattern that goes back to the 70s, that's a pretty persuasive pattern, I think. But they didn't show that on Fox News Sunday, but at least Chris Wallace was pretty persistent with the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kirstjen Nielsen, and even on this idea that being from Norway is not really a skill. Over in the penultimate clip, well, it's actually the third to last clip because there'll be a bonus Sandy clip at the end. So this is, but it's still the penultimate news clip for this evening over here.
Let's turn to that meeting that the president held with a half dozen members of Congress on Thursday. They were discussing immigration from Africa, and according to Democratic Senator Dick Durbin, the president said this.
That's when he used these vile and vulgar comments, calling the nations they come from holes. The exact word used by the president, not just once, but repeatedly.
Secretary, you were in that meeting in the Oval Office. Did the president say that?
I don't recall him saying that exact phrase. I think he has been clear, and I would certainly say undoubtedly the president will continue to use strong language when it comes to this issue, because he feels very passionate about it. I think what was frustrating about that meeting for all of us in the meeting was that although the deal presented, in theory, an approach to the 4 pillars upon which we had agreed, did not address the core security issues that we need to do our job. And more importantly, there's nothing in there that would prevent us from getting here again. So we're not interested in half measures. We don't want additional temporary populations here. It's unfair to them, it's unfair to the American citizen, and it certainly raises security risks.
I don't understand. I'm going to just press back on you once on this subject. It seems to me you were in the meeting when these comments were made. I can understand you either saying they were said or they were not said. It is pretty shocking language. And to say, I don't recall, seems implausible. If the President of the United States used the word blank hole, talking about countries in the Oval Office, or didn't say it, I would know.
I understand the question. It was an impassioned conversation. I don't recall that specific phrase being used. That's all I can say about that.
There are several things about the President's comments, alleged comments, and there are both Republicans and Democrats who confirm that he said it, that disturb people. One is the President seems to be writing off people who come from black countries while he's saying we should take people coming from one of the whitest countries on earth, Norway. Here was a comment from an official at the UN Commission on Human Rights.
I'm sorry, but there's no other word one can use but racist. You cannot dismiss entire countries and continents as holes, whose entire populations, who are not white, are therefore not welcome.
Isn't that the definition of racism, to say we don't want people from these black countries, but we do want people from a very white country?
I think what the president is saying is he'd like to move to merit-based, which is based on an individual. So what individuals can come here, can contribute to our society, help our economy, assimilate in communities, and help America be better. I take a little bit of offense to the comments and suggestions that the president is racist. What he's looking at is the exact merit-based system we have in Australia and Canada. And I am sure that we are not, any of us, suggesting that Canada and Australia and their leaders are racist.
But the president seems in these comments to be equating merit to the countries that people come from. He seems to be suggesting you'd rather have a janitor from Norway than a doctor from Haiti.
I disagree. I think what he's trying...
Why would merit have to do with the country? Why wouldn't it have to do with your qualifications?
I think it does. I think what he's trying to do is move away from a quota-based system, whether that's a quota of underrepresented countries or a quota of Norway, for example. I think what he's trying to say is we need to look at the individual and ensure that we look at those who can bring merit to our country.
All right, let's turn to the practical...
So that was a pretty valiant effort from Chris Wallace, who I often criticize for being part of Trump TV, which is what Fox News basically is. It's not really a news organization. It used to be an arm of the Republican Party, and now it's basically a propaganda arm of the Trump administration. And despite that, I think Chris Wallace did a fairly good job of making the point that I've been making multiple times, that also you saw NO8549 say that it's being Norwegian is not a skill, and saying we don't want, whether you use profanity or not, saying we don't want all these people from Africa and Haiti, we want people, like from Norway. Well, being from Norway is not a skill. That's not the merit-based system that Republicans supposedly are advocating for at this point. And that's actually a big change. For years and years and years, I've heard Republicans say, oh, we're not anti-immigrant, we're anti-illegal immigrant, and, undocumented immigrant or whatever. But that is not true, because now that they have a Republican president in office and Republican control of the House and the Senate, apparently they want to change the legal immigration system so that it's not so brown and black, or it's more merit-based. And the problem with so-called chain migration, that means whether people can sponsor family members and possibly extended family members, because that's what they're trying to reform, is that, people from some of these countries, their grandparents, their cousins, those are considered close family members, and they want to sponsor them to be part of their American success story. That's the American dream. But Republicans who are used to be, or supposedly were, the party of family values, they don't want people to be able to sponsor their family members anymore. That's what it means when they say they're against chain migration. But anyway, before I finish, I think I've talked about that last clip enough, but the final news clip before I get to the bonus Sandy clip before and end the broadcast for tonight. This is actually a Democrat. This is Michael Bennet. I think he's from Colorado, right? Isn't he the Democrat from Colorado? It'll show up when I show the clip, but he I think is showing the more wishy-washy, milquetoast response to, is Donald Trump a racist? He is saying it's racist comments that, as I have mentioned multiple times, there's a little eye over here in the corner you can click on. If you hover your mouse over there, you can answer my poll about whether Donald Trump is a racist, and one of the responses you can give is this more wishy-washy, I don't know if he's actually racist in his heart, which, actually, this is sometimes my answer, so I shouldn't be so critical of it. But anyway, this is the response that his comments are racist. We know his comments are racist. We don't know whether he is racist. And that's the response from Michael Bennet over on NBC's Meet the Press, talking to Chuck Todd this morning for the final clip before the final news clip before the bonus Sandy clip at the end of the program over here.
The Democrats have come to the conclusion that the president's a racist after these previous comments, and they point to a series of things he has said over decades, not just as president. Is that a fair conclusion?
I was raised not to call people a racist on the theory that it was hard for them to be rehabilitated once you said that. But there's no question what he said was racist. There's no question what he said was un-American and completely unmoored from the facts. He seems to have this impression that immigrants to the United States, like my mom and her parents, who were Polish Jews who came here after the Holocaust, somehow, come to the United States and just are lazy. And the truth is exactly the opposite. If you spend any time in neighborhoods across Colorado, what you find is immigrants here striving to make this country better, provide for their families and for the next generation. So I think he has no idea what he's talking about. And on the question of what's in his heart, do you have any thought, Chuck, that he would have called into question Barack Obama's birth certificate if Barack Obama were white?
That's been an open question on that debate for a long time. Let me ask you this about the view of working with President Trump in.
I really like about that clip is the part at the end there where Michael Bennet actually turns it around and asks Chuck Todd a question. Do you think he would have been a birther if he wasn't a racist? But on the other hand, Michael Bennet didn't come out and say he was a racist straight out like you saw Representative John Lewis did in the clip I showed. What was that, clip number 7, I think? But you can let me know what you think down in the comment section, or you can even answer this poll by clicking on the little eye and telling me, do you think Donald Trump is racist? I think I've given you like 4 or 5 possible responses, including none of the above, so I'm not precluding any possible answer since I have that catch-all, I don't know what the diagnosis of exclusion, I think is what the people in medicine call it. But before I finish the show, and like I said, I've answered the question. Sometimes I kind of lean towards the comments are racist. That's the criminal defense attorney in me, where you have to prove to me beyond a reasonable doubt someone's intent that they're actually racist. Not only are their comments racist, but they're personally. But Donald Trump has such a long history, such a pattern, and is reasonable doubt in our president is that you have to prove to me beyond a reasonable doubt before I'm willing to say the president is too racist to be president. That really should have been the question. Is Donald Trump too racist to be president? And the answer is yes, Donald Trump is too racist to be president. But anyway, that's the show for tonight. And as I promised, a bonus Sandy clip. This is Sandy settling in for the show. And apparently at the end, you'll see she found something to eat. I don't know what it was, but 14 seconds of Sandy for the big Sandy fans out there. I don't think there was anything to eat. I think maybe Sandy is kind of weird. She will lick the floor on occasion, so maybe it was just floor licking, but that has nothing to do with whether Donald Trump is a racist. You can let me know what you think about that by answering the poll here, giving me comments in the comment section. I appreciate the over 230 people who showed up at one point or another for the show. Thanks for your support. If you want to support me even more on Patreon as a patron, monthly patron, there's a link for that down in the video description. I've also put up new reward levels. If you give me a $5 a month contribution, I will give you one of these #LiberalViewer bumper stickers made of weatherproof vinyl. And if you go to the $10 level, I will give you that sticker plus one of these ACLU constitutions. If you send me a message on Patreon, I'll even, instead of sending the Constitution to you, I'll send it to President Donald Trump at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue with a quote from the Constitution inscribed in the front inside cover here. So that's a service I'm offering to you as well. So thank you for joining me. That's my broadcast. You can let me know what you think. You can support me with a thumbs up, with a supportive comment, with Patreon patron contributions, or just come back next week. The next couple weeks the show will be a little bit delayed because of actual ACLU commitments I have. I'm not going to go into that, but January, I think I have like 9 ACLU meetings to attend, including the next 2 Sundays in January. I apologize for that, but it's ACLU busy time, I guess. And anyway, until I do my delayed show next week, or until I have some other reason to upload a video, I guess I'll be seeing all of you around the internet.